make it small with Forest Dragon. So Forest Dragon is a Patreon STL designer creators, and their focus is to make 10 millimeter armies. So most of the ones that we look at on this channel are 32 millimeter, which is called heroic scale. This is for Warhammer people. This would be considered like a what we would call a War Master scale, but is basically really tiny, really small little pieces, and it's just for a different kind of wargaming. And Forest Dragon, that's what they've decided to focus on, is to make these basically entire army releases that focus on the super super small scale. What's awesome about it is when they release them, it's an entire army. It's huge, but because they're really really tiny, you can print out a huge army in like no time. In fact, I did the math. If I printed out an entire set of this army, you could do it in like 3 days. It's really kind of crazy. So let's take a look at it. The aesthetic, these things are awesome. They look really, really cool. The aesthetic, when you go this small, has to change. So that's why I found it interesting, and I thought that we could kind of talk about it as a difference between these and more of the heroic scale models. Things are going to seem aesthetically a little more caricatured, a little thicker, because there's going to be a concern of how frail they can be. So you'll see that wings, legs, flags, stuff like that, they're going to seem round. They're going to seem thick. That's kind of a restraint, but also it gives a cohesiveness to the way that everything looks. So we'll go through them. So here are some close-ups. So this is an Enchantress, and this looks like a leader figure. And I mean, you got to remember, this is blown up. These are really tiny. You'll also notice that it's a tapered bottom for these 10 millimeter. So what that means is that the reason they have the tapered bottom is normally in 10 millimeter, you have a squad of people into a single base. So they would normally have holes in those bases for the different models. That's why you see the tapered look. You would glue them into those little holes. But this is great. This is a great look. This is a lot of detail for this kind of model, for this size. The sword looks great. The helmet has a lot of. I mean, someone, if we were to blow this up, you'd be like, well, that looks a little childish. It does, but you've got to understand that it has to be something that's going to be able to hold. And you're going to have to make almost everything universally a little thicker, like I said before. So the trick is going to be to make it thick cohesively throughout the presentation of the models, so that it doesn't seem like you're picking on one thing. So that it seems like that's the natural state of this environment when you accept this environment. And they do a really great job of that. This is the back side of them, and it looks very nice. I mean, they seem a little more straightforward than normal models because of the size, but it looks pretty good. This is Archery. These must be the chaff units, and notice that there's 2 per base. That's again just trying to maximize the ability to both keep them at scale, but also make them durable. And you got to remember, you never see these guys on an individual basis. They're always on a base that has multiple characters on it. So you'll see them in grouping. So a lot of them are designed to be in these groupings so they'll look good in a wad of characters. One of the things that I was mentioning was like some of the design choices that you have to have. This is a great example of it here on the flag. You wouldn't want this flag to be flying up in the wind, because it would present a real challenge to how you could keep the resin supported. So by modeling it where it looks like it's folded in on the staff, you're able to give that presence of how you want the army to look, but keeping it more durable so that it works on the actual game board. But these look really nice. It is a little cut and paste, but you have to expect that with this size. But nice details in how they do the clothing and also how they keep changing up a bit of how the characters look and stuff. This is them just from another angle, lined up. All of these games, by the way, these 10 millimeter games are usually what you would call rank and file, where there's a lot more battlefield tactics that focus on flanking and positioning on the battlefield, and general choice. General meaning the leader of the army. General choices of how to use the units in the combat. So they're really great strategic games. But a lot of the games end up being large, swaths of army lined up across a table, and these are all reflecting how that would look. They give you some different options, which is nice. They also become somewhat repetitive, but that's just part of the process. These are the Pegasus Knights. They look really good for this scale. They look really fantastic. As you can see, the wings are a little thicker than what you would expect. It kind of has a little bit of the romper room toy kind of feel. There's nothing they can do to change that. I mean, they need to make it practical, otherwise they'll be breaking constantly. But these look good. I mean, it makes me want to get into 10 millimeter play. My issue is I really don't like painting 10 millimeter. It's far too small. But there's nice details on the helmet, the decorations on the heads, and then each of the shields have some unique features. And I'm assuming those can still be somewhat modular. This is the side view of those. Those look really cool. Look really nice. Like I said, it makes me want to get into this kind of gaming. My problem with it, honestly, is I have no one to play for this. But these look very good. This is how they look supported. That's another thing about 10 millimeter is you can print so much of it so fast. So it's there's definitely some niceties to it. It's a little strange to me that you would print these on their bases, the fact that they're elevated. But I think that's a choice Forest Dragon makes, because the other units that we saw, they literally are printed right on their bases. These, only because they're on a stem, does it seem a little strange, but this is why they have the supports. I can almost guarantee you none of the other ones even need supports because they're so small. Oh, that's great. So these are special characters. That's awesome. Those are really nice. Boy, those would be a nightmare to paint. It's funny because you read the article on Patreon with them, and they're like, "And it's fun to paint at this size." I'm like, "No, it's." I've done some historicals at this size, and it's rough. I was probably being too picky, but I was hurting my eyes. No, these are really nice. The wings and the horses came out nice. There's enough differences on them. And then there's the supported version. I'm a little surprised. I thought the supports would actually have more, but they look good. That's it. So it looks great. I'm a little surprised that there's no sword units, no melee units, but if it's trying to be kind of that, the classic imperial kind of army, if you were doing this in War Master, you would have a melee part of it, but it definitely would be heavy archers, so that would make some sense. But this is really a cavalry and shooting army with magic. So, but it looks nice. I thought I would just give them a quick review of their stuff, because I do like the idea that that's how they stick out is really interesting to me. Is that there is a community that wants to play 10 millimeter. It's a fun style of gaming. It's much, like I said, it's a little less theatrical, a little more tactical. And the fact that you could get away with making large armies quickly and for low cost is great. And they've made Vampire Lords in the past. They've made a variety of different kinds. They made one that was like a wood elf army, and it was beautiful. I nearly signed up for it to do the wood elf army, and then I was kind of like, yeah, maybe I'll just buy it later because just to have it. But again, it turned out to be a situation where I just wouldn't have anybody to play, so I had a hard time justifying it. I will say if you do their Patreon, it's a huge cost savings because individually they sell them after the fact, not as an army. So when you sign up, I want to say it's $10 a month for their Patreon. If you are interested, that's the way to do it because when you buy it from, they're not on My Mini Factory. They do a different service. I forget what it's called, but I'll post it. And if you were to buy it after the fact, they're actually fairly expensive. I thought it was a little high price for what it was. If you do the Patreon, it's a significant price savings. So, but great stuff. Really looks great for that scale. I can't sit here and say that I would go out and buy it because I've talked myself out of it multiple times. But if you're into 10 millimeter Forest Dragons, great to see. They're right on Patreon, and I would encourage you to check them out. Thanks.